disparage the beverage, but they were talking about how they were upset and they were worried about the debate that the candidate, Tim Walz, was going to do against J.D. Vance. And of course, they are sitting there on the couch, and the joke was, well, you know, you don't need to worry, the husband says to Kamala. You don't have to worry. Tim isn't going to say anything weird. And then they cut to the great comedian Jim Gallagher, who was playing the part of Tim Walz. And he looks right in the camera and he said, I made friends with school shooters. And then she, of course, breaks the glass and drops it and was hilarious. Well, that was not allowed to be shown by us. The second one was a video that I think was very interesting. Why don't you describe it? It was Family Feud. Here's Camilla on Family Feud. Go ahead.
Game show with Family Feud. You got Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as the contestants, and Kamala Harris is going into her stump speech, which is very long and boring, and the host was trying to get to the point, Kamala. And then he says something that you would have in your glove compartment, and finally she says a Glock, which I think is funny Glock. On many. Yeah, big Glock. So there's a couple of different reasons why that's funny. Steve. Yeah. So anyways, I mean, obviously she's super anti-gun, meanwhile, she's got all these bodyguards and security people around her. And so total hypocritical. But both of these are hilarious, Mario. And the fact of the matter is we're discussing the fact of how something has shifted, that SNL is making fun of Kamala Harris, and you'll hear our commentary on that. But, apparently they didn't like it. The joke is on them, I guess, but they didn't like what we were saying. And so they took it down. And so
what was hilarious about it is the question, name something you would store in your glove compartment. Right, and she started out by saying, well, first of all, Steve, look, I was raised in a middle-class home above a laundry, and she went into it and everyone was laughing. So tell the people why we showed those two videos, Todd. Tell them.
Yeah, so we're showing them because this is unprecedented. Think about it. During the whole Biden administration, you barely saw SNL using any. He was the greatest gift to any comic, comedian out there. Think of all the things you could say about Joe Biden. It was like a no-brainer, but they really didn't say very much. And it's just interesting that something has shifted, something's changed to where now this isn't off limits anymore, and they're actually making fun of Kamala Harris. And so we feel it goes along with what we're sharing tonight about how prayer is changing the situation. And we're seeing the rules being changed even on these comedy shows,
Well, what we're saying is that this show is a very powerful one that you're about to see. Well, you're seeing it right now. We're going to transition to the main part of the show in just a moment, but it's about the change that's occurred in her campaign is being disrupted. And Todd and I are convinced that it's because of the prayers of the saints. Your prayers about the election are affecting. And there's several levels where this problem is being seen. Number one, we're seeing a disruption in the form of everything they're doing. Every interview seems to be backfiring, right? Even when she's in the friendliest settings she could be in, The View, when she's on with her people, basically, every one of them backfired. Don't you? Wasn't that amazing? Don't you find that amazing, Todd? That's happened?
She is horrible. If she doesn't have a teleprompter, she's awful. Donald Trump is very, even though he's not the most articulate person, when he doesn't have a teleprompter, he can ad lib and talk, and folks respond, and they appreciate what he has to say. Kamala, absolutely not. If she doesn't have a teleprompter, she is off the rails. And, prime example, she just was on with Brett Baer, and we were kind of wondering how that was going to turn out. And it ended up being, on Fox, ended up being that it was a catastrophe. It was a train wreck for her. In fact, it was so bad that her people were waving in the back and trying to end the interview. They stopped it.
They didn't try to stop it. They stopped it. And the interesting thing were the two questions that stopped it is he asked her, how many people have you let into this country? And
Right.
she got mad. I mean, she was noticeably, angry and just started ranting and deflecting and never answered it. And the second question that she was asked was, when did you first notice Joe Biden's dementia? Which is, to me, the incredible moment that we're in, folks, is that she knew that the president of the United States was not fit to lead anymore because of his diminished mental capacity. And she lied about it. She lied to the American people. And once again, she just went off. But she did it because she's desperate. So I feel like we've pretty well covered it all, Todd, and explained what you're going to see without the two aspects that we were going to mention. Saturday Night Live making fun of Kamala Harris is an absolute shocker because it's a break from the norm. And I believe the norms that are being broken by the prayers of the saints. Yes. And so why don't you take us into the show right now, Todd?
That's right. So apparently they didn't want you to see these things. That's why we felt led to come on here and just share this and add this to the broadcast tonight. But without further ado, we're going to get into tonight's broadcast, which is extremely important, how your prayers are affecting the Kamala Harris campaign. Let's go into the broadcast right now. Welcome to Firepower. Todd Coconato here. Prayer is disrupting the Harris campaign. That's right. Nothing that Kamala Harris can do these days seems to be working. Everything that she's doing is backfiring. And I believe it's actually the prayers of the saints and something supernatural that's going on. And so does Mario Murillo. We were just talking about this. I'm going to bring in my friend Mario Murillo. Before we do that, though, can you please help us by sharing tonight's broadcast? Because we're going to cover a lot of very important information tonight. And we're so thankful that you've tuned in. Mario Murillo, what do you think? Do you think that there's a supernatural thing that's going on here? Because no matter what Harris is doing, something seems to be backfiring. It never works out the way she wants it to work out.
Todd, of all the shows we've done on this election, this one is the most important. I want everyone to listen closely. And, my desk here is covered with notes and stuff and things to bring out, and we're having to be careful because we have a lot to tell you. But you need to understand that our prayers are starting to work because I've searched for the explanations. I don't want to talk about how many elections I've been through, presidential elections, that, I'm not going to get into that. What I am going to say is I've never seen anything like this, where it seems that it's like what it says in Numbers 14 when Caleb described the giants in Canaan and was explaining why they were able to take the promised land. He said, their protection has departed from them. Something is lifted off of the joy, the vibe, the whatever. And I don't believe it is just miscalculation. I don't believe there's a natural explanation for this, Todd. I believe something supernatural is going on to dismantle her campaign. We want to be careful to say that doesn't mean we let our foot off the gas. We all have to vote. This thing is not a given. It's not a gimme. We still got one more giant to see taken care of. But this is an amazing moment. To show you how amazing it is, let's roll the first video right now.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
The president's withdrawal was a complete and utter catastrophe. The images of people hanging off of planes and desperate parents handing their babies.
What do you think of that, Todd?
Well, she's got a conundrum here because honestly, that question was a gift. That gift to her, what she could have done if she was on her A game, is she could have differentiated herself from Joe Biden. She could have said, look, I was the VP. I would have done things maybe a little bit different. But what she did instead was she basically said she was a part of all the decision making of the last 4 years, which the last 4 years have been catastrophic to the point where the average American, and you can ask a Democrat, a Republican, Independent, it doesn't matter. You ask them about their grocery bills, they're going to complain. They're going to say they've gone way up. The value of the dollar, has gone down. Gas prices have gone up. There's many foreign wars. The world is a much more unstable place all around the globe. America has lost prominence, and on and on and on, Mario. And so she really messed up there. And I think it's like you said, the prayers of the saints are causing confusion in the enemy's camp. And this woman was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say. So instead, she takes ownership of everything Biden has done. Wow.
Okay, so imagine late night, black and white, old movie, and it's a courtroom drama, and there is an attorney prepping his client to be cross-examined. And the attorney says, you've got to stick to the alibi we've created for you. So when you get on the stand and your attorney, this prosecutor, asks you, where were you on the night of July 13th, 1953? You are to say you were there at the home and you were not in this bar where this murder took place. You weren't there. So she gets up on the stand and she says, I was in the bar on that night. I was there. The two things that all of Kamala's handlers told her to do: distance yourself from Biden, number one. Number two, do not take responsibility for any of the policies, because once you take responsibility for the policies, you are then going to be hung on the consequences and the outcomes. So she goes on The View, the friendliest situation she could have ever been in, and says the extreme, the very thing, the quintessential answer that she should not have given, she gave it. And that's why, friends, we're telling you, God is up to something. Your prayers are being heard, and we need to keep praying and keep believing. So I want to run the next video because I think this is just going to stay very interesting, and we got a lot to get to.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and run it.
But if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control. And it's not just the social and psychological effects, it's real harm.
Wow.
You're up.
It's like Darth Vader, we lose total control. I mean, so she's admitting that they have total control. I mean, here's the thing, Mario, the legacy media is dying. We know that. I mean, our show, we're seeing, sometimes hundreds of thousands. In certain shows, we've seen millions of views on this broadcast. And that's why they're targeting us. That's why a few weeks ago, we literally had hit pieces written about this show. And what she's saying, that she's speaking the silent part out loud. They're worried. They're worried about losing total control, according to Hillary Clinton. And she's also admitting censorship. And could you imagine, Mario, if they didn't throttle our content? Could you imagine some of these podcasts out there, if they didn't censor, if they just allowed free speech, which, by the way, is constitutional, if they just allowed that to happen, forget it. We would be dominating. I'm not just talking about us. I'm talking about the right, the conservative movement, the those that have ideas, the free thoughts. It would dominate. And so we've been up against this censorship regime. And Hillary Clinton's admitting that. She's saying, look, if we lose this, we're going to lose total control. I think that's where we're at, Mario. We're at a tipping point. The tide is turning. Things are changing. And I believe it's like you said, it's the prayers. It's the prayer. The faithful, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Something is shifting.
And that shift, again, because you had a very powerful point about her term total control. She could have said, we're going to lose control. She said total control, because that's what evidently she's after. But once again, this is an indication to me of people being forced to say things against their own better judgment. And I want to read a verse out of Philippians chapter 1, and it's verse 12 in the Message Bible. I want to report to you, friends, this is Philippians 1, verse 12. in the Message Bible, I want to report to you, friends, that my imprisonment here has had the opposite intended effect. Instead of being squelched, the message has actually prospered. So think about what we're saying here. Instead of Hillary making the case for regulating social media, she exposed her hand that she wants censorship. That's not what she wanted to do. And that again backfired. And the connection to her and the regime that everyone is seeing, it's absolutely evident. Todd?
Wasn't that a conspiracy a while ago, Mario? Wasn't it a conspiracy to even, say that we were being censored? Oh, there's no censorship. Remember that? There's no censorship. Now they're saying it. Imagine that. Imagine another conspiracy that's actually once again been proved. I mean, we're running out of them. It's really amazing because I remember this. This was about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was saying we're being censored, and the left was making fun of us. Oh, Coconato says he's being censored and that their views are being throttled. Then Zuckerberg comes out and admits that during the last campaign cycle that actually was happening. You got the Twitter files with Elon Musk where he's now taken over Twitter, renamed it X, and he's gone under the covers and seen that there was all these backdoor deals that were going on. Hillary Clinton's now saying it. I mean, just think of how far we've come the last few years from things that we were told we were tinfoil hat people, and now they're saying it openly. Something's going on here.
Several episodes ago, we did a show about the demonic urge. And we explained that a blanket of a demonic spirit was making her seem palatable and acceptable and viable as a president. And then we said to you, and hundreds of thousands of you saw that show and you shared it all over the place, thank God. But I think that people began to pray. I don't believe just because of this show. That's not what I'm saying. But people began to pray. And I feel that demonic hold is shifting. Something is being forced back. God is at work in a very unique way. We're in a spiritual war. We need to keep praying, and all of us need to vote. Anyone that hasn't voted yet, you got to get out there and vote right away. Todd?
That's right. We got to be registered, and we're less than 20 days away now. So this is epic. I mean, this is the most important time probably in our nation's history, at least in our recent history. But I would say in my lifetime for sure. This election, people say why, every election cycle they talk about how it's the most important election. So how, they say that all the time. Well, here's the thing. Every time we vote in the last couple of years, the stakes have gotten higher. Now we're looking at a potential world war. It's no laughing matter. With two dramatically different worldviews, two dramatically different policy views as far as geopolitically and globally, and the way that they look at the military and what we should be utilizing our forces and our troops for. And I mean, there's just so much at stake, Mario. And I think folks are getting this, and this is where there's a change. You go to the barber shop. Folks that wouldn't talk about it before, they're talking about it now, and people that you wouldn't think historically would be on Trump. Trump is like, he's a billionaire, but he's the kind of guy that, you would trust with your grandkid. I would trust like Donald Trump. Hey, watch my daughter for a second. I would not trust Kamala Harris, and definitely not Tim, okay, with my daughter. I would be seriously concerned about a lot of things. And I think I'm not alone on this. I think a lot of average folks that are looking at this from the outside, and they're saying, yeah, I'm not buying this. I'm not. And I think, and we were talking about this earlier, I don't think that Kamala Harris is even as likable as Hillary Clinton. Not that Hillary Clinton was super likable.
Wow.
But I think she's less. I know, not that she was a likable person. But what I'm saying is I think she's even less. And then on top of that, during the Hillary Clinton years, and we talked about this last week, but a lot of folks felt, if they were a Clinton supporter, they would have felt, oh, well, at least Bill will be back in the White House. But Kamala doesn't have that. She doesn't bring, her husband wasn't a former president. So there's a lot of things missing here. And they've been trying to prop her up. But, it's like Wizard of Oz. The curtain has been rolled away. And again, I think it's because of the prayers of the saints.
And I want to tell you, we did a show several weeks ago about Ahithophel, the oracle that was at the time of King David when Absalom took over. And you all may remember, or you may not remember, but I'm going to remind you that I said, and Todd, you're my witness on this. I said, here's how we need to pray specifically.
Right.
And so it says in 2 Samuel 15 in verse 31, then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness.
Yes.
And then I said, here's a biblical example of what we need to do in this election. I think this is like 6 weeks ago. I believe you all began to pray. I think the event that we just had in Washington, D.C., where hundreds of thousands gathered to pray, women gathered to pray. I think the prayers of the saints are starting to affect the situation. Now, here's how the prayer was answered in the book of Samuel. If you go to 2 Samuel 17, verse 23, the very thing that David prayed for happened. Absalom rejected Ahithophel, which was remarkable because he was absolutely a legend. He was called an oracle. And it says, now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself. And he died and he was buried in his father's tomb. 2 Samuel 17, verse 23. If you look at where we are, how things have backfired, how everything they've tried to do, every interview that she's done has been a flop. Every person, surrogate that's gone out, even Bill Clinton, we didn't have any video on this, but we need to mention him. Bill Clinton ostensibly went out to defend her southern border policy by saying that we need a lot of workers. Our population is decreasing, which is something that those of you that drive on American freeways really doubt, that we have a population shortage. But he's saying this is what it is. And then for no reason, he brings up the murder of this young student from Georgia and says she would still be alive if this person had been properly vetted. So he literally made the argument against Biden and Harris's policy. This is amazing stuff. And I mean, what we're looking at is just beyond words.
It is. I mean, there's also been a lot of rumors, but I think they're probably real, that there's been an issue with Joe Biden's campaign and Kamala Harris's campaign. So the campaigns aren't working together. They're not, I mean, they might be working slightly, but, they're not really in sync. And I feel like, and I think many commentators, many people feel like this, that Joe Biden is still upset about the way that the Democrats just yanked him from the campaign. I mean, he was the rightful nominee according to the party and the rules. So what they did is still unprecedented. So you got confusion in the camp there. You got, like you said, what just happened with Bill Clinton. Her recent appearances on several different shows, she's blundered, she's fumbled. And now, Mario, she's actually, I guess, going to be going on Brett Baier on Fox, which this is interesting because she wouldn't be doing that unless there was a desperation. Her campaign would definitely not be doing something like that unless there was a desperation to somehow appeal to maybe independents. It's going to be interesting to see what Brett Baier does with this, because he's been given a gift. But I'm going to tell you something. If they don't give her hardball questions, if they don't hit her with real questions, I think Fox is going to continue to lose relevancy. I think a lot more people are going to walk away from Fox. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yes. Well, I think that Fox is taking a huge risk by interviewing her. I don't see any upside for them at all. Maybe ratings, but as far as that's concerned, and you were talking about Joe Biden and the rift between Biden and Kamala Harris. When Ron DeSantis was brought up, and remember, she called him and he didn't take her call. He didn't answer the phone. I thought that was real good. In any event, she got real mad, right? And she said he was selfish and he's arrogant. And then immediately Joe Biden says, well, Ron DeSantis was a great guy and he's doing an excellent job and he's real busy trying to save his people. And,
Yes.
I'm saying, dude, there's another gift right there. That's just,
he walked up the tarmac with a MAGA hat. Did you see this? There's actually video of Joe Biden getting on the plane. He's holding a red MAGA hat. And then there was another video, I think it was with some firemen or something. He actually puts the thing on. And I'm thinking, is there like a hidden message here that I'm not getting? So to your point, yeah.
Speaking of hidden messages, let's take a look at the next video right here.
He pledged to shut the southern border, end Russia's war in Ukraine.
In certain quarters of social media, people had a field day with that, and I guess on the screens it might have looked quite strange. Inside that hall, however, people were having a good time. What can I tell you? It did not seem out of the ordinary. It seemed almost intimate, and at the end, Trump did something he very rarely does. He came down off the stage and mingled with his supporters. He was signing autographs and shaking hands and the like. Today, he's doing an interview with Bloomberg in Chicago. And then
well, here's what I want to do and set up that video because it didn't make a lot of sense to you. But if I help the backstory, it will. I believe it will. There was a rally, a town hall that Trump did in Pennsylvania. There were 2 medical emergencies. So instead of continuing with the program because of these medical emergencies, Trump shifted to a concert. But well after he had explained his policies and rallied them to vote, and then he did this for approximately a half an hour. Well, the Harris campaign jumped on it and said that he had a glitch, that basically Trump was losing something in mentally or whatever. And that's why he did this in this campaign. But here's the point, Todd. Why would ABC News fact check Kamala Harris? Because they said, well, it wasn't weird. She said it was weird. It's not weird. It was nice. In fact, he came down, shook hands with people, and everyone seemed to have a good time. This has not been happening before. No. I mean, this is like, what is going on that they, ABC News fact checked Kamala Harris's statements against Trump. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and there's such a big story here that I don't think a lot of people are seeing. But, there was a video, I don't know if you saw it, Mario, it was a few weeks back where I think it was Kamala and possibly her running mate, Tim, or maybe it was just her by herself. But they walk into this room full of firefighters. And it was like an awkward moment. No one was excited or, yay, there comes. And then Trump comes in, in a similar event and everybody's like cheering. And, it was a stark difference. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because here's the thing. So the night didn't go as planned, right? There was medical emergencies. And so Trump's kind of acting as like, a DJ. He's playing his repertoire of some of the tunes that he plays at Trump rallies. But here's where this gets very unique and important is that the folks had a good time and it wasn't weird and it wasn't awkward and he didn't need to contrive anything. It was just like him just being himself. And I'm going to tell you something right now. They could not pull that off with Kamala Harris. Tim Walz could not pull that off because there's a disconnect. They are elitists and they have to be scripted. And everything has to be, shown a certain way in order to make everything look good. Trump, he's just being real. He's just out there dancing, doing his Trump dance, and folks are feeling it. And this is what they don't understand. And I'm going to say another thing that they don't understand. President Trump has been going on podcasts, and this guy has hit the whole podcast circle. Okay. He's hit all the big podcasts. No one's even covering this in the legacy media. Okay. But what people don't understand, there's been a major shift, even the last 4 years. Okay. These podcasts have millions and millions of people. And what people are liking about Trump is, first of all, it's not scripted. He can just get up there and just talk. He can talk shop. He's being passionate about what he sees wrong with the country. And people are like, yeah, I see that wrong too. I'm concerned about that. So he's hitting court after court about what's concerning Americans as we go in our cities. She's not doing any of that. We don't even know what's her policies. She doesn't even, all they're doing is against Trump. That's their whole campaign is anti-Trump, where Trump is talking about policies. He's talking about things he's going to do. And I did hear on one of the earlier clips, they're saying, well, we don't know how he's going to do it. But you know what? He's got a track record. And the fact is the guy, he does what he says. And I think that's very important to people.
And folks, you got to get where firepower is going with this, because we're going to have our firepower moment tonight. But where are we going with all this information that we're giving you? Let's rehearse where we were 6 months ago. Everybody, just let's go back. Somewhere in a smoke-filled room, the most powerful media, legacy media people, the Democratic Party, sat down to strategize how they would take a non-candidate and make her a candidate. There are two things that this reminds me of. First is the movie My Fair Lady, where two professors are boasting arrogantly that they could take a girl from the wrong side of London who's Cockney street flower sales girl and turn her into a princess and fool people of tremendous wealth and power that she was quite a lady. And of course, it was an amazing film. And Audrey Hepburn was amazing in that film. I believe the same exact thing happened in the back rooms when they realized that they could plan an epidemic, create paper mail-in ballots, that they could take their tentacles. We've got the legacy media. We've got the social platform. We've got Zuckerberg. He's going to throw 400 million into a manipulation of people.
Right.
And this time they said, we can do it again. In fact, we don't even have to have anybody as smart as Biden. We don't even have to have someone that has accomplished anything. In fact, let's get someone who's a blank canvas, who's capable and willing to do whatever we say. It was arrogance. It was an insult to the American people. That's what happened. And so they did it. They had the witchcraft behind them and money and everything else. And you started praying. And the church started praying. And you know what? Part of the demonic work, Todd, was in the pulpit.
Yeah.
It was in the pulpit. Because the devil fooled. We have 500,000 Protestant ministers in the United States. I just wrote a blog about this.
I was going to say, you need to talk about the blog because that was so good.
And I'm amazed what it's doing. And really was a question to pastors saying, why are you letting deceived Christians silence you? And that's what was going on in this blanket of silence. But what has happened is a turning in the spirit world. That's exactly what's happened. And I read a verse from Philippians chapter 1, where Paul said, I want you to know that the things that have happened to me have had the opposite of their intended effect. And then later on, he explains where to put the credit for that. He says in Philippians chapter 1, verse 19, in the New King James Version, for I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. This turning that we can't explain. I mean, we're not privy to the details of why Saturday Night Live is now doing this, or why there's a rift between Biden and Harris, or why she said the last thing she should have said. But I believe prayer is in the middle of it, and prayer is affecting it. Todd?
Yeah. That's 100% right. If you think about, let's go back a few weeks when Lance Wallnau was with us, and, we did the show and he talked about being bewitched and, got picked up by all these legacy media people. But think about what happened there. It was very important because what we did was we unmasked something and we went there. We went there where a lot of people haven't gone and say, you know what, there is a demonic influence that's going on. There is something that's happening here. And so since then, and I'm not, again, taking credit that this show is the only show that's talking about these things, but what I think is that there are more folks that are now addressing the real issues and the real problems. And it needs, I mean, you can't fix a problem until you actually, okay, this is the problem, and so the Bible talks about pulling down strongholds. The Bible talks about how we have authority in Jesus' name. And so, Mario, what I see happening here is I see a praying church, a real praying church rising in America. And you know what? Let's just be honest. In the past, could we have done a lot better? Yeah, we let the country get to where it is now. And so there had to be a turning. There had to be something that happened. And now I'm praying, and this is why we got to pray this through, that this is that shift. This is that moment where the American church awakens and we see a true move of God and a turn back, because ultimately it's not political, it's spiritual, and there's no politician that's going to save America. So we have this opportune moment, Mario. I really believe it. And your blog just really kind of articulated this so well, but we have this opportune moment for us to take the authority that we need to as the body of Christ and pray this through and see how the Lord responds to the prayers of the righteous. So this is that moment. I mean, here we are, it's an exciting time. And everything that we pointed out tonight, everything that we pointed out tonight, it's supernatural. I mean, think about the hurricane. It was a Cat 5, right? A Cat 5 that was going to hit Florida. All of a sudden it gets to land. And I believe through the prayers of the saints, it diminishes. The eye wall splits. It becomes a Cat 2. Yes, there was damage. And yes, there was some fatalities, but it could have been a lot worse. It could have been so much worse. And so something happened there. Think about, a few months ago when they tried to take out and unlive, I'll say that so that we don't get censored, President Trump. And remember, it was that split second turn. And all of a sudden, what could have been catastrophic and a game changer was averted, and God spared America. Think about Israel's been under attack. Iran sent, many, many missiles to Israel, but most of those missiles have been intercepted. I mean, we can go on and on with, they told us, Mario, that President Trump would be in jail. They said he'd be in jail, campaigning from jail. He's not in jail. So what I believe is happening is the church is stepping into our role as the restraining force against the wicked plans of the enemy. And we can't let up. We got to press in. We got to fast. We got to pray this through.
Amen. I think this is a good moment to assess, where do we go from here, Todd? What do we feel in our soul? I'm gonna throw this out. What this is an opportunity. And there's a difference between an opportunity and a finished deal. And I think that there is a doctrine that has crippled the church that, this is in the hands of God. It's in the hands of God. Right. God's going to take care of it. No, God has made it very clear that we have a role. Otherwise, prayer would be a simple, symbolic non-event. Either prayer is real or it isn't. And the only way, and I want to say this, and I want you to get this, folks, the only way that prayer can be real is if God has actually limited the circumstances so that outcomes are dependent on prayer, not on some mystical thing that's going to happen without us. Otherwise prayer doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to it, but there is everything to it. And I think that the prayer of agreement, the idea of churches stopping business as usual to fast and pray, is life and death. And I believe that we have this golden moment that has fallen in our lap now, where we can see the tangible result of our prayers. And you know what's going to happen? God is going to get the glory, because Amen. This didn't happen by debate. It didn't happen by our wits. It didn't happen by our talent. It happened because we sought God and we released God into the situation. And I think that right now, I've never seen a time where pastors of different denominations that I've come to know in the last couple of years, whether they're Methodists or Baptists or whatever they are, all of a sudden there's a camaraderie, there's a unity, there's something happening with us because we have realized that we face a common threat. And right. And I think that's so. What do we? Besides that, what do we tell the people now?
Yeah. Well, don't let up and don't get comfortable. And, I think about what you're saying, Mario. We always talk about 2 Chronicles 7:14, but one of the things that says and tells us to do is if my people call by my name will humble themselves and pray. And so prayer is definitely one of our most important and strategic weapons. And, I'm trying to do my part at our church. We're having 21 days of prayer and fasting. I know others like Jack Hibbs and other friends of mine are doing this as well. And what if every American church, what if every Christian in America were to join? Could you imagine if every Christian were to fast and pray for these next, under 20 days now to this election on November 5th, if we all press? And here's the thing, even when the election happens, and let's say we see a victory, we still got to pray, because then we're going to have the time from the election to the inauguration. So we're in very unstable times, and all of us know that they have other things up their sleeves. And there's other wicked plans and other, so what we really need to keep doing is the prayers. What's happening is the prayer is pushing back and thwarting these plans. And it's confusing the enemy's camp. It's causing, they're having to deal with other things that are popping up that they didn't expect. And that's what we're talking about today, because it's the prayer. Prayer is changing the situation. And I don't know in my lifetime on a macro scale, when I'm talking about, politically and watching the nation, Mario, I don't know that I've ever seen prayer be so tangible and so visible and so evident, because it's like every odd, has said that it's going to be different than what we're seeing right now. The only explanation, to your point, is prayer. And hey, listen, it's working. So now we got to do it. We got to pray it through. And we got to continue to press in. We got to continue to be on our faces before the Lord and crying out for this nation. But something is happening, and we should be encouraged tonight. We should be encouraged, because if you notice, and something that I've noticed over the years, Mario, and I know you'd probably agree with this, is that a lot of times things will happen in the supernatural before you see it manifest in the natural. And so I feel a lightness tonight that I didn't feel only a few days ago, only a few weeks ago. I feel like there's been a burden that's been lifted off of me. And I was feeling a real heaviness. I still feel an urgency. Oh, yes. But in my spirit, though, I feel like there's a gaining momentum. I feel like that even if they try to pull something else, that just as these other things have been thwarted, we can also see that thwarted. Does that make sense?
Yes, there is a principle of war that I want to comment on. But before I do, I'd like us to look at the next video.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border. Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting, because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said, rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs.
Now, see, once again, what you have there, J.D. Vance is very articulate. He's got a thing on him it's amazing. And Trump was, he's on a different level, that he decided J.D. Vance should be his running mate. But what you saw there was, once again, something like Jesus described in Luke 21. I'll give you a mouth and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to gainsay nor resist. His argument was irrefutable. There was nothing she could say. We would have played more of that video, but it was pointless, because there is no answer for that. I mean, how can you be upset that we exaggerated the size of the gangs that took over on American soil, American property, from Americans who are here, people who are here illegally with guns, took over a building? And you're worried about Donald Trump exaggerating it instead of Kamala Harris's policies that allowed it. It's part of what we're saying. Now the words are getting through. This is like in the science fiction movie where the ammunition is finally piercing the force field and you're seeing damage being done. But I feel like it's a time to understand that one of the principles of war that's called pursuit. You see, an army is never more vulnerable than when they have won because their enemy is on the run. But their enemy still exists, but they're on the run. And because of the euphoria of winning, the victorious army is in no mood to chase their enemy. They want to party. And this is where generals discipline their armies. In the ancient warriors discipline their armies to be ready for pursuit. And when they would chase their enemy, they would understand an enemy in retreat is falling back on their supplies. So they're actually being replenished. And very many wars were won on a counteroffensive, meaning as an army went in retreat, it fell on its resources, it rearmed, replenished. Meanwhile, the other army is in euphoric state. They're not the fierce warriors they were during the heat of the battle. And suddenly it was lost. You know, I'm going to say this, and it's a little bit scary, but I think we need to say it. Do you think that the left doesn't realize they've been wounded? They do. Right. Do they realize their campaign has been messed up? They do. And are they prepared to take their vast resources? Listen, they raised $1 billion. They outspent Trump by a lot. And they couldn't move the needle, but they still, in retreat, are a wounded animal. And I expect a counteroffensive. I expect that what we need to do is dig in our heels in prayer and be ready for an onslaught like we have never seen before. And I don't believe that they're going to win. I don't believe Kamala Harris is going to win. I'm not prophesying Trump's victory. But I'm telling you, I believe it. Ultimately, we're going to come out of it, but we are not out of the woods yet. We have got another assault coming our way. And I think that what God is trying to tell us is, look what prayer did. Look at the victories that prayer won. And we're at that moment, like David said to Saul, said, your servant killed a lion and a bear that came after my sheep, and this giant shall be like them. That's the proper posture that we should be taking, folks. The firepower army needs to see itself as we won. We proved we can take this enemy. Now let's redouble our prayers and our unity. Put on the whole armor. Expect a massive onslaught. And it may be even that Fox News is going to be a traitor. They may end up being pro-Kamala. You don't know. Brett Baer, all of that. I'm not going to say what I really feel, okay? But it could backfire and we could be in another assault. But we now know that prayer works.
Yep. That's right. And people that are, Christians right now, we need to be lions. Okay. And there's a lot of people sharing lion memes and lion pictures online. But what I mean by that is let's just say even Trump wins, okay, and maybe even it's smooth up into January 6th. Very highly unlikely that nothing happens between now and then, but we're praying and we're believing, and maybe these things are going to be thwarted. But we never can go back now to complacency. We never can go back to apathy. We're in a new season. You can't put new wine in old wineskin. We can't go back to that period of time, the 90s, the 2000s, the period where America just kind of, we didn't say anything while this whole thing was being kind of, started, and it got to, now where it is now, where they're literally saying there's 30 something genders. And it's just the insane demonic stuff that we're seeing out there. This didn't just happen overnight. So from now on and from us forward, we've got to speak boldly the word of God. We've got to preach boldly the entire counsel of God from our pulpit. We can't be afraid or ashamed or embarrassed to ruffle some feathers. I remember, Mario, there was a pastor in California. He was a good man. He loved the Lord. And honestly, he believed in a lot of things that we're talking about tonight. But one of the problems that he would say to me, he'd say, Todd, I can't share what you share on social media or half my congregation would leave. Those days are over. Like, you can't worry about half your congregation leaving because you're speaking the truth. People are going to look at you and say, hey, man, are you a pastor? Are you bold or not? And so I think we're in a new era, and it's not just for the pastors, it's for everybody. We've got to be prayer warriors. We've got to be intercessors. We've got to know how to pray. We've got to know how to effectively war in the spirit. And these are things that honestly weren't talked about too much over the last 30 years. So I think we're in a new period. And to your point, I think about like a rabid dog that's like, in a corner. That's kind of where they're at right now. And that's when the most crazy stuff happens. So we can't let up now. We got to press in, keep praying, and understand the dynamics of what we're dealing with.
That's right. And I think we have another video, and I want to see it. I think every time we've shown it, it's just made the power go up another notch. So let's watch this one.
I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable.
President Obama, why didn't you tell the folks with the cameras rolling and the black men in attendance that there's been diminishing black voters, particularly black men, since you were in office? In 2008, 95% of the black populace voted for Barack Obama. It dipped in 2012 by about 6 to 8%. It dipped another 6% in 2016 when Hillary was running. It dipped even more in 2020 when Trump ran against Biden. It's been dipping since 2008. It didn't just start. Was that about misogyny? Was that about a hesitancy to support our women? I am getting sick and tired of black men being raked through the coals because of some imagery of not being supportive of black women. Do you know what most black men would do if they saw a black woman getting harmed in the streets? They put their lives on the line for that sister.
Wow. I got to say right away, because we're going to run out of time, that is a telling moment for us.
Yes, it is.
That Barack Obama was directly challenged by Stephen A. Smith and the way he was, saying, this isn't about the fact that she's a woman. And how dare you speak to black men and say that the reason they're not going to vote for her is because she's a woman. And then Obama flat out lied. I mean, you talk about disgusting. He said, a man who has denigrated you. See, that's the Russia hoax. That's right. The constant, the Trump derangement syndrome, that he is a racist. It is so beneath Obama that he dragged out that corpse, that falsehood once again. And I really feel like it's going to backfire because he insulted those men. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I want to say something. The young people, the young generation are flipping. And this is very, very important and something that we haven't seen in a while. Okay. And what's happening is, I think there's a lot of different things, but there's a spiritual awakening that's happening. And we've been seeing it, Mario. I know you've been seeing it for a long time, but the lines have never been as long. There's never been as many hungry folks, no matter what city we go to. And now the final piece, the young people, this has been what we've been praying for. And there's a shift. And so what's happened is African-American voters, Latino voters, you name it. Okay. Young people, this whole thing is unraveling, this whole lie. I mean, you think about everything that's been pushed on us for 20 plus years. The whole thing is unraveling. That's why you got Hillary Clinton on there saying we're losing total control. She's not lying about that. They are losing total control. And when you have somebody challenging Barack Obama, who you remember they were trying to make him out to be like Jesus. They were putting him on Time magazine and, making him out to be like some savior or whatever. We know that's not true, but that's what they were trying to do. No one thinks that anymore. Something is. That's why they didn't run Michelle Obama. She wouldn't have won. She wouldn't have won. And so something has changed here. And this is what the whole show, we've been building this up to prove to you. If this were a court case, we brought irrefutable evidence of something is shifting. And our argument tonight is we believe it's the prayers. It's the prayers of this community. It's the prayers of the saints. Go ahead, Mario.
We need to run the last video. I want to skip. If we have any others besides the last one, we're not going to show them tonight. We've got one last one we need to show from Fox. And I think this is the nail in the coffin. Let's watch this.